And got it.
Hello and welcome to At a Crossroads with the Naked Podcaster. I'm your host, Jen Taylor, and today we have no intro video and we had lots of technical issues. I'm very excited to be here with Angela Marshall. Angela, how are you?
I am doing outstanding. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh, I love having you. This is great. I'm so excited. I am working off of, I am working off of two computers right now. So if I'm looking off to the side, I'm not wishing I was outside in a bathing suit on my back patio. We had technical issues, so I just switched gears real fast, which happens. And I have all my information over here. So I want to jump on first onto your website. And the website is In Other Words by Stone. I love it, but I love a play on words. I love the In Other Words. And I'm really, really excited about this. You have an incredible story. So I want to jump into your website and I want you to tell me everything that is going on your website.
Absolutely. Again, thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be at the crossroads, which I am. I find myself there many, 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 many times. My website, I actually named it that. Stone is my maiden name. Most people don't know that because I'm still in Angela Marshall, which is my married name. But my website, In Other Words, by Stone. Stone is for my maiden name. And In Other Words just comes from many, many people that I've helped over the years. They would either come to me for advice or suggestions. And then when I would give them my gentle words, they would say, in other words. And so when I started my business in 2016, that's how I came up with In Other Words by Stone, because I am a ghostwriter. I also write speeches for politicians, for professors. I do bios, resumes, all things writing proposals, grants, anything that deals with documentation. We review that, me and my team. So all things documents go through In Other Words by Stone. Now, as a byproduct of that, I wrote a book, actually 3 books, but one in particular that has...
I didn't know that. I didn't know that you were an author. Yay, congratulations. Okay, somehow I missed that.
I am a published author, but I'm also a featured author in a 3rd book, which is Women Who Lead, which is an anthology that chronicles women across the globe, their struggles to success. But one book in particular that I wrote, which is my autobiography, that it is the story and life of an ex-NFL wife. That book and the contents in that book catapulted me to be a motivational speaker. So I have I wear a lot of hats and I wear them proudly. Yay. I do not take it lightly as far as being able to do the things that I do to just, not only just earn a living, but to help other people on their journeys as well. Okay, did I miss it?
Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. So that was just totally playing over us, and I apologize for that. So how did I not realize on your website? I'm going to go back to your website. Where are your books located?
Under shop.
Oh, got it. I didn't go to shop. How did I miss shopping? I don't know. I am so excited. So I buy books from every one of my podcast guests who is an author. I've bought at least one book. Okay. So I'm so excited about this. And I'm so proud of you. So tell me, I don't want to get into your story too much, but I have one big question about your story that I know we're going to get into. Tell me about the speaking. Tell me, are you going to write more books? What? And as far as the speaking engagements, that's what people can come on the website, but you do ghostwriting too.
Absolutely. I do ghostwriting. I also, as I mentioned, I write speeches for politicians. A lot of people don't know that, but I have written for high profile politicians. And the ghostwriting actually came as a form of trying to supplement my income when COVID hit. So when the pandemic came, or it started wreaking havoc on in-person events, which is what I was doing prior to that.
Yeah.
I just started boosting, ways for me to still be in service, to get other people's stories out, as well as continue to tell my story.
I love that. I love stories though. And people can hire you. I know usually we save this for the end, but you do things that are so unique. People can hire you to ghostwrite or to write speeches and that's what your entire business is about, correct?
Absolutely. Creative content consultant. So even if they already have their manuscript and we don't do any type of interviews for me to write their book, I also do editing. Yeah, all things documentation. I am your girl.
Wow. What about websites? Asking for a friend.
I do creative content for websites as well. I've written slogans for people that are, campaigning for election, whether it's judges, different seats. Yeah, I wear many hats.
Well, all of them know, I mean, grant writing is its own animal.
Absolutely.
Copywriting is its own animal. Like I'm a published author too, and I've had a blog for 10 years. I've written for other companies, but copywriting I don't do copywriting and I don't do grant writing because your brain has to think in a much different way, even if you're a writer, to do those things. So the fact that you can bounce between those is pretty astonishing. That's pretty astonishing because I tried copywriting and I even did a course in it and I was like, copywriting is just not my thing. And grant writing.
I think for copywriting, you have to be one of those that can embellish. Like you have to be very, very creative and truly an out the box thinker. Yeah. So for me, what I found with my clients that request my services for that, I have to really do interviews, a lot of one-on-one interviews to really get into the minds and the hearts of what the project is in order for me to be, of great assistance when it comes to copywriting. Grant writing, I've done 3 of those. And most of it, basically, it was already done when the corporation enlisted me to do it. They really needed me to just edit a little bit and do a little bit more research as far as the verbiage was concerned to make sure that those buzzwords and those keywords were in the grant, in the documents.
It's a very specific and exhausting type of writing to me. So I mean, I love to write, but I did not do grants. And I thought for a while, if you get really good at grant writing, if your mind can work that way, there is such a need for people to have someone come in specifically to write grants for them.
Absolutely.
And I thought, man, that's a lot of pressure. It's very tough language. So how cool and how amazing that writing your own book kind of launched you into this just out of curiosity, and we may go into this later too, but what was your job before you wrote the book and this kind of took off? Did you do anything like this?
Well, I was a documentation specialist writing SOPs, which is standard operating procedures for a pharmaceutical company.
Oh, no wonder you could do copy. Okay.
I did that for about 12 years, 12 years. And I resigned from corporate in 2016 to start my own business and just kind of live out loud, so to speak.
I like living out loud. All right. Well, that makes a little bit more sense because so the grant writing, the copy, I actually with you would think it would be more difficult to switch gears and do the other writing because you were trained more to do grant and copy style writing if you were doing SOPs.
Correct to a certain extent, but when I was younger, it was my 4th grade teacher who saw in me the ability to tell stories. Yeah. And I mean that figuratively and literally, like I would tell these elaborate lies that had nothing to do with my life. But of course, like the other children would think that I was telling the truth. She knew I wasn't. And she had even though I would get scolded for telling untruths, but she also had the foresight to steer it in a position to where it was like, well, you know what, Angela, why don't you enter this contest or this essay, this writing contest, and I would win. And so that's how it came about, as far as me being able to tell my own story, to write books, short stories, and just become really a compelling storyteller.
That's so great. I love The Lies, man. Those are books within themselves. And I know that people who write, like, when you're writing fiction,
Mhm.
well, it's just different. It's a different thing. But when you're writing stories and making things up, I've talked to those, because I don't do that, but I've talked to those authors, this incredible fantasy and drama, and you are every character, you're part of every single character you write about. So
I think it's because it's already in us, to be honest.
yeah, me too. I know. Like there's a little crazy sided, it may be part that we wouldn't take it in that direction, but still.
Correct.
Awesome. Well, I want to jump back into your story because this is overlapping a little differently. So take me back in time at where you started. Where did Angela start?
Well, I am an Augusta, Georgia native. I grew up here with my grandparents, two amazing grandparents. I often wondered what the deal was with my biological parents. Like, why was I left there with my grandparents to be reared, to be raised, house full of with cousins and aunts and all of that? Had, an abundance of love. But of course, when you're younger, it's just like, I'm seeing other children, my other friends with their parents, but I don't have mine. So then, of course, you get a little bit of rejection or abandonment or, different things that are going through your mind that you have no idea, why you are where you are, what has happened to, my parents. So I had a lot of questions with that growing up. And I think it impacted me to the point to where, you fast forward to, pretty decent childhood during middle school, well, elementary school, middle school, and then high school. It started going a little, getting a little sour there, to where the identity thing was just so all over the top, to where, I was pulled this way, pulled that way, and then just didn't know which way to go, which is why I started my mission and my platform of telling people and helping people to live vicariously through themselves, because I would always live vicariously through other people. So then, in high school, I met what some would deem my high school sweetheart, which ended up being the father of my two children. Also, my husband that was in the NFL, which is the National Football League. We went to high school together. We, had this supposed amazing life. Then we had a lot of drama, a lot of trauma when he, made it into the league. He played for the Denver Broncos. He played for the New York Giants. Then we went through a really, really hardship of divorce. And, the separation was very difficult for me, because then it meant now I have to go out into the real world and have to, either get a job or try to figure out what life needed to look like from that point. And I started working for a temp agency in 1999 when the divorce was final. And I stayed at that particular corporate pharmaceutical corporation from 1999 to 2016.
Wow.
So it was an amazing and an incredible journey, ups and downs, highs and lows, a lot of me trying to figure out, answers that really I already had inside of me, but just, as time would have it, we're always trying to look externally and look outside of ourselves for what we think we want to be, and what we want to have in life. And one thing just kind of led to the other, but it wasn't until 2013 when my mother eventually died of cervical cancer, when my life actually unfolded to the person that is before you now. And for me to be able to step out and do everything that I've done with my business and my brand.
I want to go back to, you said growing up, you were left with your grandparents and they were raising you, and it was a loving environment, but you still have to go through that abandonment. I mean, I've adopted kids, and even though they were making a better choice, I think you have to work through like, why wasn't I worth it? Why couldn't they get their act together? And that's super common feeling, right, to go
Mhm.
through. When did you know your parents? Did you ask those questions to your grandparents or parents? What kind of connection do you have growing up?
Well, let me just say this. I am 50 years old and not like today's children and today's generation to where they are seen and heard. In my back in my days, you were to be seen and not heard. So there were
Right.
just certain things that you did not inquire about. And that was one. I would see my mom periodically, didn't really know much of the man who, she says is my dad, because I don't really have a relationship with him. I did have one, off and on with my mom, but then we reconnected, obviously when she was on her deathbed and everything. And I did not get the answer to that question until 1 week before she died in August of 2013. So had I gotten
Wow.
it a lot, and I was born in 1971, but
Right.
had I gotten the answer to that, which it was a very simple and non-complicated answer, had I gotten that before, it would have changed the trajectory of my life at that time. But her words to me was, she wasn't ready to have a child. I was in a better situation by having my grandparents that were married, that were more stable mentally, emotionally, and financially. And she did the best that she could. And it was just that simple. And it
Isn't that
freed me.
crazy?
And it freed
Oh,
me. It really did. But meant those years of just turmoil, of just feeling unloved, unwanted, just not really knowing, like, why do you not want your kid with you? Why do you not want your child? Why do you not want your child with you? But
right.
again, had I, had that information long before 2013, things
Right.
probably would have been different.
And you're right. I was born in 1970. So I completely understand that whole, you know, it was a different world. And unless you dive into what things were like for everyone in the 70s, just in general, um, and I did that. I grew up obviously in the 70s, but when I wrote my book, I had to go in and really dive deep to what the culture was like in the 70s. And a lot made sense to me that it didn't make sense before. Like, why would you do this? Why would you say this? Why wouldn't you do this? And really, it was surrounding the culture of that time period. So I do understand what you're saying. It just stinks that what a simple answer that was gave you so much freedom that you like, why couldn't you have known that earlier? But I'm glad you
And it's
found
not
out.
like it was so like a ticking bomb to where it would have just stopped my heart for me to know that, one, I wasn't financially stable or emotionally or mentally stable. Just to
Yeah.
hear that from your parent with such certainty and honesty, it just means the world. So when she said it, and then she ended it with, I did the best I could, and leaving you with, grandmother Luella and granddaddy Sam was the best. That was the best course. And that's why you've turned out to be the woman that you are today. So,
Wow. But you're okay. So I have another really big question, and this we can jump into this story after you answer it because you wrote the book about being an NFL wife. I was a doctor's wife. There's certainly some privileges to certain lifestyles, I guess, or professions. So the profession creates a lifestyle, and there's also an image of what that looks like. If you say NFL wife and I say doctor's wife, people instantly put us in a category and make all these assumptions. And yet both of us have divorced those people. So something in that didn't work well. And not necessarily the profession, but it's not as like pretty and perfect little box as people think. So what was it like for you? Because I know my own answer to write about that. How was your ex-husband with that? What conversations did you have to have? Like to be able to write that book had to either blow up and devastate. What was that like? I'm trying to put those pieces together.
okay. So, number one, the book is Reality to Rags to Riches, the story and life of an ex NFL wife. So reality, which is the first section of the book, I talk about being a light-skinned little girl growing up in an all African-American environment. That's the reality. Then we go into the riches, where I actually meet him, and it's the NFL. I walk everyone through what high school was like, what having children early was like, being in that lifestyle when he, went undrafted into the NFL, going through the divorce. And then we go into, I'm sorry, that was the rags piece. So it's reality to rags to riches. So that was the rags piece. The riches piece is after the divorce, which that's not a disclaimer for, you divorce people and then you get riches. That's just my story. So right. The divorce piece, and then I talk about going into secular employment as a former NFL wife, having 2 children at the ages of, they were 11 and 9 at the time, needing, support and care and all of that while I worked a 12-hour shift. Then I decided, okay, in order for me to package this book and to market it appropriately, people need to know the difference between my reality to rags to riches story than the billions of rags to riches stories that are out there. So within that book, I don't just talk about how I went from a modest upbringing to, Benz and houses and power. None of that is in the book. All of it is about, each section is about growth within myself, whether it's mentally, spiritually, or aha moments, things that have, that really have poured or tugged on my heart or have poured into me for me to become a better person. My publisher with that particular book is the one who wanted to put the story and life of an ex-NFL wife on there to get attention, and it has worked.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking at your books and stuff, and I understand that. I mean, I could write about my marriage, and it's just a fine line between writing about your perception and your story, knowing that it's just it's half of the story or one of the perceptions of the 2 people. And that if I'm writing it, he couldn't defend himself, or he's not speaking to that, right? So I'm always super careful. I don't talk about divorce a lot, just because you can get into actually defamation of character. And I applaud that you were able to write through all of that and just really stick to what you learned and your truth, because it is hard to discuss that your relationship fell apart without discussing why and how that happened and what that meant. And yeah, I haven't been able to figure out really how to do that delicately and still drive that point home.
Well, right? One way that I was successful in it was, first I went to him and I told him that I was going to write a book and it was going to be based on my life, and that I would not include anything that would make him, appear in a derogatory or dimmed light. Because really the story is about me. So that's why we tagged on there, the story and life of an ex-NFL wife. Now, there are those, of course, when they interview me or when they request for me to speak, they're wanting this quote unquote tea or gossip or dirt. But like I tell them, you're getting my story. So everything that I'm discussing is about me. It's from my perspective. It's from my view. And then I'm not going to, talk about anything that will diminish him in any way, because in my experience, it was not my ex-husband, which is why I did not really enjoy that lifestyle at the time, or the NFL. It was my lack of growth and maturity at that time. So that's what I talk about.
Yeah. I mean, I applaud that. I know that it's possible, and I know I have touched on some of those things. It's even your story. Yeah, it's good that you can do that. My brain is trying to figure out how exactly I would do that without him feeling anyway, it's all good.
Well, in my book, he actually pins, there's a blurb that I have a picture of him in my book, and he's saying congratulations, because I made my story about me. I think when you take away the negativity or the he did, she did, he said,
Right,
she said,
right,
and
right.
all of that. And then you just focus on how can I put out content that's really going to help people grow, which is,
Yeah.
that was my intent. Well, that was the first intent. The second intent was just because in my entire life, it was like people would always say, oh, I wish I had that life, or I wish I
Yeah.
had your hair, or I wish I had your this, or I wish that, which is why I came up with the platform, Live Vicariously Through Yourself.
Yeah. I love it. Okay, so because there is definitely going to be a stigma behind what your life was like and why would you want to give that up and what is the matter
Always.
with you, and yeah, I feel that too. So and I just to clarify this, I remember saying I'd rather live in a single wide trailer poor than live that life anymore. Like money does not make up for other things that you lack. So you guys met in high school too. The other thing I think is challenging about that is when you're in a relationship and you're trying to grow up together.
We talk
Right?
about that. We talk about that often, both of us.
Yeah.
Just, and then the difficulty with that is when you're trying to grow up or you're trying to find yourself, and then you have these two little people, or even if you just had one child that you're trying to navigate and help them become who they should be, but you still don't know who you are, it's very challenging. And it was challenging
I
for both of us, but more so for me than
Yep.
him, because he's always been, very confident. He's always been very sure. I mean, that's the reason why he defied odds and he made it to the NFL, you know. But for me, it was just, having that intimidation from early on, and then just my external environment looking a little different from me and being picked on, being bullied, just different stuff that was being, sewn into my brain, so to speak, SOWN into my brain about why this was this, or why I looked this way, or why, whatever. I mean, it was just a lot to unpack, and I'm still unpacking it.
Well, here's some good news and some bad news. And I was trying to find, I have a quote, but essentially what it says is that, your kids don't realize that while you're helping them create the story of their lives, you're still trying to figure out your own. And of course, kids are not going to understand that. Like even when you're trying super hard, we're imperfect, naturally, and we're trying to figure it all out for ourselves and create their story at the same time. And the good news is it's not a one and done. You don't arrive someplace. It's all about the journey, right? It's not the destination. And also, like we don't tend to like figure it out and be finished with that. It's a never ending process. And that's the good news. And it's also the bad news, because that means that you're not going to get there and then it's all good. And as your kids get older and they start figuring it out, like, I am sorry, I'm a human trying to do the best job as a parent while I'm also trying to figure out what I'm doing on my own.
That is why I could not be mad anymore. I couldn't be hurt when my mom said her final words, which was, I did the best I could. And I really
Right.
believed her. Like when she
Right.
said it, it was in that moment, like, wow. And I'm sure she did. And now as a mother, and especially like my children, I have two amazing children. Our son is 33, our daughter's 31. We have 5 amazing grandboys. And my children, they like to tease me a lot and say that I've become softer and I've become more lenient, and more wiser, I guess, so to speak, with the grands. But it's like you said, it's a process. And I just really feel like I am a forever student.
Yeah.
It really bothers me sometimes when people are like, oh, I've arrived, or if I'm asked that question, like, well, when did you know you made it? Made what? Like I'm still on a journey. I'm still on a path.
Yeah.
And it is one that is hard at times. It's not like, I wake up and I'm this positive penny all day, every day. I have to decide, I have to make a decision like, okay, no, you are going to, do this or execute this or carry out this, or you're going to, be the best in this particular situation. And it's tough sometimes, but, I know that this is why I was placed here. My mission is to positively impact and influence through my words, work, and wisdom. So I got to make it work.
I mean, I think that that's kind of a reminder to you of what your goal is, because it kind of like I do gratitude journals. I do a lot around
Yes.
gratitude and changing the lens you view the world. And that helps keep me accountable to myself, because I'm not going to tell someone else to do something that I'm not doing already also. And, so I think you teaching that and that being a huge thing that you do is part of what pushes you to be accountable for that. And yeah, everybody has bad days. I've been sick. I've had a bad day. I've had kids in the ER, or doctor's appointments that don't go well, or car accidents. I mean, like, life happens.
Life
And
happens.
yet, despite that, you still push forward into that positivity, because that's the only thing that's going to change. You can't change the things that happen to you, but you can change your attitude surrounding them, right? And so,
Absolutely.
is it easy 100% of the time? No, but it is possible. And I think that's super important. You divorced when your kids were younger. How did that go? It sounds like you have a good relationship with your husband now.
My ex.
And I'm sorry, your ex-husband. I apologize. Yes. How was the decision to divorce, and how did the kids handle it? How was the time split? And yes, I was a stay-at-home mom married to a doctor, and then I went back to work, and that looks a lot different, a lot different. And so you have to relearn how to even parent and structure your time and everything. So I completely understand that. So what did that period of time look like for you?
It was very much like all of the Facebook emojis. So happy, sad, mad, wow. It's like at any moment you could click one, and then there I am, or my face is, with different things that I was going through. I was more concerned with my children, believe it or
Yeah,
not, than myself.
of course.
And trying to make it just as seamless and easy of a transition for them as possible. Because again, growing up without my parents, even though my grandparents, and I want to make sure that people understand that we're wonderful.
Right.
The upbringing, the morals, and the values that are in me are because of them. The character, everything that was built, is because of them. But I just wanted my children to not be impacted as much. I guess the irony of it is that I was still growing and still trying to mature. So it was kind of inevitable that they felt some thunder rumble, but I was really just in a mode of what do you call it, like a mama cub, trying to protect them as much as possible, and not change their world, which I mean, let's face it, realistically it did, because I
Did.
went from being, in this NFL lifestyle to now I have a $10, when I first started out with the temp agency, a $10 an hour job. You go from X amount of rooms and bathrooms and exclusive neighborhoods to now we're in a 2-bedroom, 2-bath townhouse. So, it was just like, but one thing I will say, my children never made it hard on me. Like, some, they become accustomed to certain things. And then, it's like you have to continue or try to keep up with the Joneses or the Smiths or whoever just to make life work. My children, they weren't like that. I mean, I did everything that I could to make sure that their life was uninterrupted as far as the extracurricular things that they were in. Tried to take them on trips and vacations. Was not as elaborate as what we were used to, but I still tried to expose them to a lot of different cultures and different things, and just try to keep that family unit there as much as possible. I remember the day that I actually told them that, okay, which we had told them we were going to get divorced many times. I mean, we talked about it off and on for like 4 or 5 years.
Okay.
But I remember the one day in particular when I told them that, we were divorcing, and I was actually, because they were 9 and 11, I was giving them the opportunity if they wanted to stay with their dad. Because really I was being fearful. It was like, oh, I'm not going to make it. I just, I don't want them being exposed if their days, and this is my own mind, immature mind, like, oh, I may not have enough to eat or whatever the case is. I don't really know what lies ahead. But I knew, and and I quote this from the book, like, I knew they were sick of us, me and my ex-husband, when I said, okay, you have the option. You can go with me, things are going to be different, or you can stay with your dad, he's more stable. And they both were like, when are we leaving? So they were sick of him, they were sick of me. And I guess it was just like, let's wait or two. We'll just, struggle it out with mom. We'll tough it out with mom. And I think the three of us have a particular bond and closeness because of it. The maternal bond, for them to sometimes be at odds with me, I think that's just normal. But overall, we have a really, really good relationship.
Yeah. And I mean, I went through the same type of situation where you're like, I'm going to do everything I can to make this as easy as possible. And then like, really, you can do, like, that's possible? No, it's going to be hard. It's going to be different, and it's going to be challenging, and it's still going to be good. But I know what you mean. As a mom, you want to bridge the gap for them. You want to make it easier for them, because you already feel so bad that it's happening at all, and that you're putting them through this because you couldn't figure things out and have a successful marriage. And so
Absolutely.
I totally understand that. They still have a close relationship with their dad?
Yes.
That's
Of
good.
course, it's not like the relationship that they have with me, because I think I put a little bit more work into it.
Yeah.
Because I felt, and not that I'm not saying that he didn't feel guilty, because I'm not trying to speak for him, but he
Right.
still, was doing appearances, and he was doing different things. So he didn't have, he didn't prioritize his time enough to make sure that they came first, put it that way.
And yes, I understand that. And I mean, that's not necessarily a put down either. We have to, you're faced with so many tough decisions as a single parent in divorce, in these situations, that there's not necessarily a right way to do it. There are lots of ways to do it that have pros and cons, and you just try to do the best you can. So I'm glad that they have a good relationship. And I think the relationship between kids and dads and kids and moms is different, even in situations where they stay married and it's a good relationship and good situation. I just think it's dynamically very different, their relationships with us in comparison. So that might have been the case no matter what happened.
Right.
So you get your $10 an hour job, but you work for them for a long time. And I'm anticipating that you worked up in that situation. It was a big learning curve for you. Like, I hadn't worked in a decade.
Okay.
When I divorced and I had to go back to work, and I didn't finish my college degree, and because I was supporting him. So you jump back into that job, and it's a big learning curve. Like, the whole thing is a learning curve. So take me through that, and kind of how things went in the job, and how that prepared you, especially if you didn't know it was preparing you. That's the best, right? Like, right. I didn't even see that coming. How that prepared you for writing your book and transitioning out of that job.
Well, I will say that the job and the tasks, the roles, the position, the money was kind of an issue, because again, it wasn't great. And I'm trying to now pay rent, pay lights, pay, all of this stuff. And it was very, very shaky. I mean, like, from day to day on my, just mentally, it was a lot. But I'm going to be very, very honest and transparent. The greatest thing that I faced was the talk and the backlash. Now, I didn't walk into any place and disclaim, hey, I'm a former NFL wife or blah, blah, blah. But because we were here locally, and because my, other people knew that we had gotten a divorce, all the gossip and the rumors that I had to face day in and day out. I mean, I was vilified, and then others, other people were for me, others were against me. And I mean, it was just a lot. So I went through a lot of nights to where I couldn't really, like, I was wrestling with myself, like, okay, well, maybe I just need to go and, go to a different state or whatever. But I said, you know what, if I run now, I'll always be running. And, no matter what, all the people that are talking or that think they know the situation between my ex-husband and I, they're not offering any help. They're just offering all hurt, or they're offering all, hashing lies and whatever else on top of the situation. But I started out in that company in 1999, making $10 an hour. And when I resigned in March of 2016, I was making $31 an hour. So yes, I was able to, climb the corporate ladder, as they say. And, just really, I left on my own terms. I left on great terms. I left, being recognized as a really value added employee, which is important to me. Even now that I own my own business, anytime I'm interacting with a client or a customer, I always try to make sure, was I value added? Was I a benefit? Was I beneficial to you? Not just because I'm taking your money, but I really want, you to be able to see the dynamics of your life or whatever it is that you need, that it's changed. So it was just at that time, from 1999 to 2016, when I had to go back into the corporate world, it was a lot. It was a lot professionally. It was a lot personally. I mean, we as people, and I don't want to, just put on this victim hat as if it only happens to me, because I know this is a lot of people's story. I'm just bold enough to tell it on your podcast.
Yeah.
But it was a lot. I mean, there were days when I would just, behind closed doors, and my children never knew it, but I would just cry. I mean, like when they would go that particular weekend with their dad, and I wasn't crying because, like, okay, my marriage ended, or because I feel lowlier than that. I mean, it was just a lot to process and internalize, because I felt like, when do I get to tell my story? Ding, 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 move forward. I'm going to write a book. So that is one of the things that was very therapeutic, which I did. I had a very good therapist that helped me through everything for 3 years after the death of my mom in 2013. But just writing, journaling. And like you said, it's not just about, gratitude, writing about the things that are bothering you, but then also the things that you're grateful for, and having that balance. And it just all worked out, it all worked out for me.
Yeah. Writing and journaling is massive, massive. And I can't even begin to speak to how important and impactful that can be, to just write about it. And I mean, some people write about the really tough stuff and then burn it, stuff that you don't want anybody to find or you don't want to reread, and different ways to release some of that emotion. But it's a lot to work through. And, I mean, I've had therapy that I don't think did anything. And I've had therapy moments that have been super, like, so impactful. I really think it's about, like, with any kind of therapy, it's finding the right modality of therapy, and then the right therapist, and being really ready to share that and listen, because it's not ever all someone else's fault. So, man, personally.
Well, that was one of the things in my therapy with her. I would always tell her, I'm not making this about my mom. I'm not making this about my absent dad. I'm not making this about my ex. And if you see me going in that route to where I'm pointing blame, as opposed to, being I'm continuing down a road of being a part of the problem as a part of the solution to freedom, I want you to redirect me.
Oh, yeah.
And so initially, it was because, of course, when you talk to people, it's usually, well, and they did, or she did, or she didn't, or he didn't, or this is, but just being able to guide me appropriately. And it's just another thing that I tell people in any profession: when you are seeking the services of someone, you better make sure that it's someone, that their services will bring you some positivity, and not just about profit, but positivity, and be able to take you to the next being, the next state of being. It's just so important. Every therapist, every doctor, every podcaster, every, published author or whatever, some are just there, trying to earn a couple of dollars, as opposed to how can I really be beneficial to people, and, just make sure that they're better, because I was in their life.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. And you know what? I love that. I just love that. You're really doing a lot to work on yourself. You're doing a lot in this job. You're balancing out the kids, which is super, super tough to do. Remaining positive with your ex-husband, trying to be positive yourself, going through this growth journey. And then with the situation with your mom, it's interesting. You haven't mentioned therapy or anything that you needed to do during the divorce and with the kids. Like I mean, I know you're on like survival mode. You're working, you're trying to figure it all out. Like it's kind of a survival mode thing and do a great job. You didn't reach out and ask for help or during that time though?
Honestly, two things. One, I didn't know I needed it.
Yep.
And two, I didn't know it was available.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
it's crazy how that generation or my generation,
Right.
if you had a therapist, it's because you were crazy. No
Yeah.
pun intended.
Yeah. No,
It's because you were
there was
crazy. And
something
so it's
wrong.
right. So it's like, no, I just I don't need any couch time. I'm not trying to harm anyone or
Right.
harm myself. And so
Or
it's
get medication.
or get
Or
medication. That's
yeah,
correct.
right. Right.
That's
Right.
correct.
Okay.
So it's just, I honestly didn't. I just felt like these are problems, these are issues. Everybody has them, or, it's just life. And I like to say shift happens.
Yeah. Every day.
Yeah. So that's how I viewed it. But no, I never, thought that was an option. And then where would I find the time? It's crazy that you mentioned that, because I just sent my children a text about, it's not that we don't have enough time, it's just we don't do the proper placement or prioritize how we should, or put things in perspective for us to have an abundant 24 hours. But back then I would have said, oh, well, I don't have the time. I got to do this. I got to work. I got to cook. I got to clean. I got to, the children and all this other. Where am I going to find the time for me to go see a therapist?
Yeah. I mean, I do get that. I did feel like that. And here's the other thing. Our generation, I think, like I've done a lot of studying on this, and our parents it was one of the most unhealthy generations. The values and where they were coming from, they didn't make the best parents by default because just of the generation that they were in and the society that they lived in. And I know that, like you and our generation, we wanted to change that. No divorce, no abusive relationship. And, like we were so geared on doing everything right and not making the same mistakes that we inadvertently made more of them, maybe in different ways. I mean, I've thought about that a lot. Like, how did our generation come in really wanting this to go differently, and yet really not hitting the mark, like way off the mark on what our goals were, because we wanted our family life to look different. And I don't have an answer, except that I think sometimes it takes a couple generations
Mm-hmm.
to kind of even out some of that. That's a very interesting separate conversation. So when the situation with your mom happened, what led you to finally feel like therapy and all this self work? And had you already started doing some writing on your own before that, or did you jump into your book?
So my book was already written, because for
Got it.
years, I had journaled. So for years, I just wrote different things, because like I said, I got tired of people coming up to me and assessing, giving me what they thought my life was like. And so I would just write about it. Some I would, actually stop and have a conversation with, but most I'm like, you know what? They don't really want to, they're not talking to me to hear my side or hear my story. They just really want to, just fantasize because of stuff either they see in magazines or on TV or whatever. And so they're just, that's just what they're going to believe. Now, as it relates to my mom and knowing that I needed therapy at that time, I will have to say I'm going to give the recognition to hospice, because when they put my mom on
Ah,
hospice, they offered me 2 years of free counseling, and they
oh
strongly
wow.
suggested that I take it. So I did that counseling first. And because it was so therapeutic, and it just helped me in a lot of ways. Like I had so many other unanswered questions, not just about the relationship with my mom, but then like my mind started shifting to, okay, well, now I can probably use therapy to really grow myself or to become a better person. And so that's how, that it shifted from hospice, which of course their therapy is more, I mean, their counseling is more on grief and, and the loss of your loved one. But how my mind works in is I take whatever it is and I try to apply it or turn it to say, okay, well, I can also use that in this situation or for this particular area of my life, whether it's financially, economically, socially, romantically. And that's what I started doing. And then I sought out a therapist to continue the conversation after the hospice counseling was over.
That's so great. And here's the other thing. I want to pose this and see what your thoughts are on this. Grief is generally assumed that it's because someone died, but grief and loss, I mean, we know through COVID, right? Like COVID's been massive. Yes. And through that, people are experiencing grief and loss in a way that they like, basically I can talk about it and people are like, oh yes, I totally understand. Because you can have a loss of control, a loss of the life that you used to have, which is divorce. I mean, divorce, loss of relationship, and there's a lot of grief in all that. Even I wanted my divorce, don't get me wrong. I was adamant that it was going to happen. I could have stayed. I did not want to. And so because of that, I can still experience a lot of grief and loss within that. And we don't, as a society, recognize how much grief and loss you can have in a car accident, when your house is burglarized, if your purse is stolen. Like there are a lot of, or like another example, grief and loss is one and PTSD is another one. Mm-hmm. And like we know, when people go to war, it's so common, but yeah, you can have PTSD from that car accident also and experience tremendous grief and loss. So I think back when you got your divorce and when I got divorced and all of that stuff, we didn't recognize that we were living through grief and loss similarly to the loss of a person in our life that we're close to. And so I'm sure, like, starting off with the specific grief and loss of your mom, and then what? Like, and then there's all these other things that you felt you had a hard time with or you wanted to work through. And there is a direct correlation with grief and loss in so many other areas of our lives, and we don't even give it, we don't even take stock of that. COVID, the pandemic, did change that because we felt grief and loss in so many different ways that now it's like, oh yes, it can be the loss of your job, right? The loss of working in an office, the loss of maybe the rights taken, like so many things. It's not just, there has to be this traumatic death in your life, and then you can go to therapy for grief.
Absolutely.
So how great that it started that way. And then what? And then,
well, let me say this
to everything else. Go ahead. Yeah.
That is correct. But from a spiritual standpoint, where it exhorts us to die to self.
Yeah.
So from the reckless, different behaviors or different routines or habits, mindsets, different things that I had just kind of, put in place for myself, I had to die to those things. And you're right, it is a grieving period because I experienced a lot of hurt, a lot of disappointment, from a lot of anger from time to time with different things or people, places, and things that I've had to let go or detach from. That's an experience of loss as well. So it's just, for me, I'm kind of used to now, I guess, going through the counseling and knowing that it's really a good thing to be able to, have some sort of a rebirth, I guess, so to speak, from time to time. So I look forward to blowing my life up.
In some ways.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't want anybody to think I mean that literally. But just, like sometimes, and I get it when people say, you got to have a plan A and then you got to have a plan B and this. I don't have that. I have a plan A, and plan A just has a lot of bullet points and a lot of subtitles and subcontext and whatever. And it just keeps, sometimes it shifts to the left, then it shifts to the right, then it keeps going straight. So I just think that from the standpoint of, when you're talking about loss, yes, absolutely. It is, one of the things that I have learned to internalize and to process and use as a strength. So I take, whatever that stumbling block was, and not saying that the death of someone should be viewed as a stumbling block, but at that particular time for me, losing my mom that I really didn't have this great relationship with in the first place. And then all of a sudden, having to turn it into a stepping stone. Well, what a wonderful and elaborate stepping stone to be able to be so transparent and open and tell my story to help other people.
You already had the book pretty much written when this happened, and you went through the therapy, which I'm sure added a lot of depth and layers to your stories. I had never even considered, I'm glad that you brought it up, that people would make so many assumptions about you as an NFL wife, and that you would be the target of blame or shame, or man, people can be awfully mean.
Even now, like, people will say to me, you're using the story and life of an ex-NFL wife to have 15 minutes of fame and this. And I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Like, if you actually take the time to visit my website, or like the stuff that I put out, the content on all of my social media outlets, I'm not this person. I'm not flashing, this particular lifestyle and materialistic things and whatever else. Like, I'm sharing my deepest pain. I'm like unmasked. I'm unchained. I'm, just really trying to give a different perspective of, okay, yeah, you can have all of those things and you can aspire to be more, do more, and have more and see more. But, it's in the moments of when you actually have to face yourself, whatever that looks like, that's what I project the most. And in all actuality, that's when I get the most hate, which I couldn't understand it. It was just like, now, if I was online and I'm, snapping and I'm all glammed up and glitz and, it's a wonderful life and, everybody's liking and loving. And then when I'm, really trying to just bare my soul, and it's, oh, she's trying to use her, once connection to her ex-husband. He was really the star. She's not. It's like, really? Come on, people. So I just kind of took the road of, well, if I do or if I don't, it's going to be about equal as far as the backlash that I receive. So forget them. I'm just going to do it because they're only like 2% anyway.
Right. I was always told that once the haters arrive, you've made it.
You've made it.
I remember, like, my first really negative comment, I was like, yes, I made it. Somebody took the time out of their day to be negative and hateful. You could just say nothing and move on. Just don't listen. Just get off my website. Like, just don't interact. No, you actually took time out of your day to be negative and hateful. I've arrived. And I think what that means to me is that means you're sharing at a level that touches nerves in other people, and their expression is a mirror of who they are and how they feel. And so in that sense, you have arrived because you're sharing at that deep level that triggers people to look at themselves. And when that's uncomfortable, they lash out at you. The good news is that you shared at a deep enough level to make them uncomfortable.
Absolutely. I stand by 100% that when I tell my truth, other people's hate and lies don't matter.
Yeah. I want to kind of wrap up. I was trying to think of how I wanted to wrap up. And I think I would love for you to share how you became brave enough to put your stories out in that raw, authentic way. How did you push past the fear of sharing that story? Because even if you're pretty confident, you still know that when and if there's a backlash, it's really hard to face some of that. So how did you grow your strength to be able to do that Yeah, I think that that's kind of where I want you to share, because I know people, some people really, every one of us has a great story to share, and some people are really afraid to do it. And I understand that fear because the backlash is hard. So where did you get that kind of chutzpah that allowed you to be able to do that, knowing that there could be backlash?
When my editor sent me the first reviewed manuscript of my autobiography,
Okay.
and I read it in its entirety, and it did not give me anxiety. Because like before I would write in my journal and I would read my entries, and either I would cry or I would get sad, or there would be some sort of emotion, right? Or some feeling that would be associated with it. But when she sent me the first edit of the manuscript and I read it, and I felt invigorated. Like I felt really like a superwoman as I was page after page after page. And it was like as if some sort of transference of power from me to the book, to the words, to
Yeah.
the words, to the book, back to me. And I said, you know, I'm ready, because when we did, you know, the first set of edits, and she said, you know, this is it. When we put this out there in black and white, you won't be able to take it back. So are you
Yeah.
sure this is the route that you want to go? And because I felt so, I'm not going to say invincible, because at times certain things still, you know, will kind of throw me off target to where I'm like, wow, that kind of hurt what she said or he said or this comment or whatever. But when I read that first edit, I just, it's like I said, for this, I was born. You know, this is the purpose, and this is why I went through everything that I went through, the path, the you know, the travels, the journeys, the ups, the downs, the highs and the lows, for me to be able to put this story out. And from that story, there's other little stories that bridge from it, because as people read the book, of course, you know, they're like, well, tell us about this, about that. And each time it's almost like, you know, that tree that's growing, you know, it starts out and, you know, it's got a few little bulbs or little whatever. And then all of a sudden, you know, it's now you got the roots and the branches. And I mean, and I said, it's time. And I was really proud of the words, even though there are some really, really down times that I talk about in the book. I mean, there was absolutely nothing within me where I felt reserved. I felt like it's, you know, a good tool to help people to really live vicariously through themselves. And the majority of the comments and the reviews that I get, it echoes that. So it was time.
I'm so thankful. I want to end with your website now. If people, because you do copy and grants and ghostwriting, you write for companies, you're a speaker, how can people best find you? Is there someone who's a really good fit, or someone that you haven't worked with that you want to work with? Or let's just end on this high note of who you are and what you're doing now. You're helping people express who they are. In my opinion, you needed to express yourself in a way that people understood who you were, and you help other people express themselves in a way that allows them to show who they are and accomplish the things they want through copy and grant and writing. I just love that. um, so how can people get in touch with you? Do you have an ideal client? What are some of the things that are your favorites to do that you would love to do?
I actually have two ideal clients. First, the first client is going to be those, you know, organizations, companies that are looking for a public presenter that will help people to, you know, not just know what they're doing, but know why they're doing it. So being able to speak from my own experiences, from my own trials and tribulations, and then also to give the struggles and the success, there's always a sense of that audience leaving there with, okay, this is what I'm going to put in place, and this is why I'm going to put it in place. So I've always felt very, very proud of being able to do that. The first thing I do when I step out onto any stage, or even from a virtual standpoint, is I try to make sure that they understand that I'm not just here because, there's some sort of monetary gain. I really want you to better your life. And in order for you to do that, you can take certain bits and pieces, tips and tools that I've set forth, and then just make them into your own, because there's no one size that fits all. My second client is going to be anyone that is needing ghostwriting. If you need words, you need wording and content, sentence structure a little better, making it pop a lot more. I'm your girl. For any speeches that you need written, I update, I create bios, resumes. Most of the resumes, especially like for high school and college students, I do for free. That's my give back. So, I get a lot of, because before COVID, that's one of the things I was doing through the temp agencies, is I was giving training on resume writing.
Oh.
But now, of course, there's no in-person. So, I'm unable to do that, but I still, by word of mouth, either high school and college students will send me their resumes, and I will update them or create them for them. So those are my two ideal audiences. And really anyone, if you go to my social media pages that just need inspiration, that needs uplifting, I'm your girl, because I dance. I do all types of things from day to day that, really is just living life full, teaching you how to live life full and how to live life free. My website is www.inotherwordsbystone.com, or you can Google Angela Marshall, Augusta, Georgia.
Angela,